What if the stories you carry aren't shackles, but secret invitations? What if the emptiness you feel isn't a flaw, but the birthplace of something nobody's seen before? Take a breath, this isn't just another speech. This is the beginning of your own wild legend. There's a reason ordinary days have always tasted bland to you. There's a reason you're drawn to the places most people ignore, to questions that others run from, to feelings too intense for quiet rooms. That isn't restlessness. That's the first flicker of a world-changing fire only you could ignite. You're not a collection of missing pieces. You're a phenomenon in progress, still gathering the raw material for your masterpiece. And today, something in you is stirring. Something bigger is ready to step forward. This isn't the moment you shrink back. It's the moment you realize you were born to leave an imprint so bold, the old explanations break beneath your feet. Subscribe now and don't miss the next big shift. Most people wait for answers to arrive like mail at the door, never realizing that their questions have been building entire landscapes within them. Incomplete isn't a label, but a state just before the symphony begins. No calendar can mark how close you are to your own ignition. The things that left scars on your timeline weren't setbacks or mistakes, they were silent architects, designing this crossroad from behind the curtain. It's never been about repairing some imaginary defect. Every tangled moment, every misfit season, every silent night where hope looked extinct, these were the blueprints for your own becoming. Not one fragment was wasted. And right now, all that hidden effort is about to show its true face, as the life you've been sensing beneath the surface begins to emerge in full color. Sometimes what sets a person apart isn't what they do, but the way they carry the weight of their own story. This isn't just motivation, it's a mirror. If you've ever wondered why ordinary advice sounds hollow or why your spirit refuses to settle for less, know this: you're not following anyone else's formula. You're rewriting the rules just by showing up as yourself. You were never made to fit a tired script. That ache you feel for something greater. It's proof you're meant for a rare kind of impact. The path might not always make sense from the outside, but the truth is, most people will never get close enough to understand how much power is hidden in your honest moments. This is the beginning of something that can't be taught, only unleashed. Emotion has always been the architect behind invisible changes, not a force to be tamed or silenced. The quietest truths often break open reality when spoken not out of routine, but from a place that's been reshaped by both struggle and longing. Real influence doesn't answer to shallow declarations or borrowed hope, it recognizes the unmistakable signal of authenticity, especially when life presses hardest. Every time words surfaced from a place stripped of pretense, every raw confession became the ignition that moved unseen tides in your favor. That's not weakness. That's the kind of honesty that can rewrite entire outcomes, even when it feels like no one else is watching. Your presence bends expectations and disorients the ordinary. People don't just feel inspired around you, they feel rewritten. Not because of what you say, but because of what your energy dares to undo in them. That's why it's essential to retrieve what was scattered. Call back the essence you left in conversations where you were edited, in places where your light dimmed to fit shadows, in connections that siphoned instead of fueled. Restoration isn't dramatic, it's deliberate. Those restless years of movement weren't detours. They were reconnaissance missions. You were never lost, you were surveying the land, collecting fragments of wisdom others skipped over. What looked like drifting was actually the architecture of preparation, laying unseen foundations for something the world has no blueprint for yet. And those towering visions? They weren't too large. The rooms were simply too small. The systems you walked through weren't made to host depth, only repetition. You were offering oceans to people afraid of puddles. What they labeled too much was actually the preview of what will eventually be normal. You weren't forecasting chaos, you were translating the future. You didn't walk away from those structures because you're defiant. You walked because they collapsed under the weight of your authenticity. Gratitude alone couldn't mask the suffocation. You didn't reject opportunities, you outgrew them mid-sentence. Your soul has always known, you are not here to fit in. You're here to reconfigure. Now, everything you've gathered is folding into itself like stars becoming galaxies. Your sensitivity, your refusal to dilute your truth, your wild capacity to love and lead, none of it was wasted. They were raw ingredients for something that doesn't yet have a name but is already forming in the world through you. What's coming alive could take the form of a movement that breaks molds, an invention no one saw coming, or a rhythm of living that others will soon imitate without even realizing you were the origin. It won't scream for attention. It'll echo quietly in rooms you haven't even entered yet. At some point, recently, perhaps imperceptibly, you stepped into a version of yourself untouched by previous limits. It might have felt like déjà vu, or a sudden moment of knowing that rewired you. Whatever it was, the shift was real. And you're no longer walking into alignment. You are the alignment now. The tide has shifted in your favor so quietly, most won't notice until it's already unfolded. What once seemed locked behind time and effort has begun to take form right in front of you, without warning, without begging. What felt unreachable is drawing itself closer, magnetized by your alignment. Assistance is emerging not from the usual paths, but through unfamiliar bridges and names you haven't yet learned. Someone out there already sees what you carry and is preparing to extend a hand that opens the next gate. What you once called delay is revealing itself as precision in disguise. Something ancient is stirring within your bloodline, something that had long fallen silent. The chain of repetition is weakening, not with violence, but through restoration. Where there was once estrangement, new language is forming. Distance is folding in on itself, and what was fractured is being rewritten, not to mirror the past, but to compose something untouched by it. Where absence once stood, you may soon find presence so true it feels unfamiliar. It hasn't been about rebellion, it's been about clarity. The life you've been shaping, the values you chose over convenience, the path you followed without a map, all of it has been echoing into places your feet haven't touched. Your decision to rewrite the script has disrupted patterns stretching far beyond your own timeline. And that disruption? It's healing, not only you, but anyone quietly watching you choose what once seemed impossible. Even now, as these words find you, your essence is rippling into conversations you're not yet part of. Someone is studying your rhythm from afar, sensing the puzzle piece only you can provide. This isn't about fame or noise, it's about the weight of your authenticity reaching spaces where the old formulas no longer work. One of these unseen observers is already carrying your name like a key. The opening that's forming ahead of you is not a coincidence. It's a corridor being constructed from choices you made when no one was applauding. Whether it arrives through collaboration, creative visibility, or sudden resonance with an audience that's been silently waiting, you're not walking toward it, you've become the reason it exists. The silence before it breaks is sacred. You're not arriving late. You're arriving as the spotlight adjusts to fit you. There's a momentum building beneath your feet now, subtle but undeniable. If there's an idea that's been lingering, a calling you've placed on pause, a spark you've been afraid to ignite, this is the crack in the timeline where all hesitation loses meaning. The fog is lifting not just from your thoughts but from your entire system. What once felt like resistance will soon feel like fuel. You won't need motivation, you'll feel compelled, as if pulled by the thread of who you were always becoming. The momentum you've been sensing is not abstract, it's precise, electric, and designed to be acted on instantly. This isn't the hour to analyze every angle or perfect the plan. It's the hour to move. That old idea you shelved, that conversation you postponed, that step you circled without committing, it's time to breathe life into all of it. The creative voltage arriving isn't meant to be admired from afar. It's a countdown that activates everything dormant and demands immediate ignition. Some souls are engineered to build entire worlds from dust. Not everyone begins with a full palette, but that doesn't mean the painting can't be extraordinary. What may look insufficient from the outside is actually the ideal ecosystem for innovation. You weren't given excess because your brilliance thrives in minimalism. You aren't here to replicate, you're here to initiate. Where others saw voids, you saw configurations. What they dismissed as lack, you knew was raw material. Your pathway won't follow blueprints made for linear lives. Your prosperity isn't buried in systems that reward predictability. It blooms from the intersection of originality and presence. And the more you anchor yourself in honesty, about how you create, when you recharge, where you thrive, the more the world bends to accommodate your rhythm. That's not rebellion. That's intelligence. Whether it's a corner you've designed for unfiltered creation or a life that defies templates, your success is tied to your capacity to remain in sync with your own pulse. Not everyone can survive outside the grid. But you're not just surviving, you're conducting an orchestra only you can hear. If the gravitational pull of creative independence, healing work, artistry, or founding something entirely self-forged keeps returning to you, it's not a detour. It's the central mission. These urges are not distractions. They are coordinates. And following them isn't risky, it's encoded in your design. These expressions are the bridge between your inner fire and the people quietly waiting for the light you haven't released yet. The raw materials are already assembled inside you. The knowledge acquired, the tests passed in silence, the insight grown through friction, it's all there. And when you finally let go of the need to justify your power, you'll see how easily it reshapes everything it touches. Permission isn't required. Only conviction. And here's what matters most, you are not building from fear. You are shaping the future from clarity. Every disappointment that tried to unravel you was really just sharpening the edges of your capacity. Every closed door was a rehearsal in emotional precision. The version of you emerging now is not seeking a crown. It is the crown. This next phase may move fast, almost uncomfortably so. The tempo will shift before you've adjusted, and the invitations will arrive before you've rehearsed your response. Things that once felt distant will now approach like magnets drawn to the frequency you've been quietly tuning. And the solutions won't come because the problems vanished. They'll come because you're finally calibrated to see what you couldn't before. There's a compass inside you now that doesn't just point, it pulses. It isn't guessing, it's recalling. Every moment you resisted borrowed beliefs in favor of what your bones already knew sharpened its accuracy. That voice inside, the one that once whispered through fog, now speaks clearly through silence. It no longer needs permission to guide. You've finally stopped mistaking instinct for impulse, and that distinction has unlocked a pattern of direction that bypasses confusion entirely. A new rhythm is unfolding in the shape of unexpected arrivals. Individuals are stepping in, not by coincidence, but as part of a larger coordination you couldn't have planned. Some will reflect truths you haven't owned yet. Others will carry the missing piece you didn't know you were sculpting space for. A few may arrive with doors you once knocked on long ago, now ready to be opened without hesitation from either side. And here's the anchor in all this, these connections are not favors. They are resonance. They're not charity wrapped in compliments, they're responses to the field you've been generating through consistency, grit, and unspoken sacrifice. You didn't trip into alignment. You trained for it, sometimes without knowing what you were even training for. But the momentum? That was earned in silence. You've become someone who doesn't collapse under experience, you bend it. You carry the rare ability to process adversity in a way that reshapes its chemistry. What others call misfortune, you've quietly repurposed as instruction. You don't just live through difficulty, you digest it, reinterpret it, and return it as something lighter, something usable. That's what sets you apart. You don't let emotional weight rot, you convert it. You absorb the noise and return clarity. You pick up fragments and offer patterns. This isn't coping. It's construction. Your nervous system is tuned not just to feel, but to decode, to build. What others see as fragility has always been your high-functioning calibration. And this gift doesn't end with you. It extends outward, toward the places in the world where that very same pain still lingers without direction. What you've lived through, struggled with, cried over, those weren't detours. They were detailed research into wounds that still ache in countless others. And now you know how to name them. Better yet, you know how to solve for them. Where others chase wealth through repetition, yours will come through originality fused with service. Every struggle etched into your timeline was tuition for this moment. You weren't just enduring, you were mapping a system. And soon, the very thing you thought disqualified you will become the credential that magnetizes everything meant for you. What you've been through didn't just test your limits, it refined your perception. The emotional storms you survived rewired your understanding of wellness in ways no textbook could teach. The scarcity you once called home gave you an insight into value that others overlook entirely. And the patterns of heartbreak you unthreaded by hand taught you the architecture of human behavior so precisely that you now speak fluently in the unspoken. Those weren't just struggles, they were advanced training. You've never been able to fake alignment, and there's a reason for that. Any path that felt hollow left you restless, not because you were difficult, but because your design refuses to settle for success without soul. The friction you felt in lifeless roles wasn't rebellion, it was guidance. That persistent sense of misfit was your compass resisting anything built on extraction instead of contribution. Without knowing it, you've become a silent strategist. Years spent observing what makes people trust, what makes them hesitate, what makes them buy, what makes them leave, it's all been accumulating like data in the background. And where others chased conversions, you watched for patterns. That makes your next move different. You won't need to shout to be heard, because the resonance of your honesty cuts through noise on its own. Be mindful of what you give your focus to right now, because the response is no longer subtle. Manifestation is becoming immediate. What you place your attention on grows faster, sharper, louder. This isn't coincidence, it's calibration. The field around you has been tuned to respond with exactitude, and the more precise you become with your direction, the faster things will organize around it. There's power not just in your vision, but in your voice. The moment you speak from clarity, the world begins to adjust itself to meet you. Vibrations aren't just metaphorical, your tone shifts timelines. Words anchored in conviction ripple past this moment and into spaces you've yet to arrive in, assembling the conditions required to receive what you've already claimed in your spirit. No part of this journey has been solitary. The invisible support systems surrounding you, whether felt as intuition, uncanny timing, or sudden breakthroughs, aren't accidents. They are echoes of your alignment being met with reinforcement. Your pathway is being co-authored by an intelligence that knows exactly what you're capable of, even on the days you forget. And now, an older strength is rising within you, one not born in this lifetime alone. There are codes buried deep in your bloodline beginning to stir. Not curses. Capacities. Not weights. Blueprints. You're not just creating something for now, you're laying the ground for future hands to build upon. What you're shaping will echo beyond your name, sustaining not just your story, but a lineage that begins to breathe because of you. You're building something whose true magnitude won't reveal itself until much later. What now feels experimental will eventually become foundational. And the real friction isn't coming from outside noise, but from within, specifically, from the familiar identity that found comfort in postponing power. It's not doubt you're battling, it's the muscle memory of surviving instead of thriving. Before anything substantial can take shape, there has to be a letting go, not of people, necessarily, but of the old scripts they once validated. Stories of hardship that used to protect your heart are now blocking your expansion. And while you may love those who walked beside your pain, not all will walk into your emergence. Some will cling to the version of you they feel safest around. Not all relationships collapse through drama. Some dissolve silently, as the vibration between two realities loses its bridge. You're not breaking ties out of resentment, you're simply outgrowing equations that no longer solve. There will be those who don't know how to witness your rising without feeling their own stalling. That's not your burden to fix. It's their truth to meet. At times it may feel like you've become invisible, but that emptiness is sacred. What you're sensing isn't rejection, it's a frequency mismatch. You're no longer coded for rooms that run on depletion. Soon, new alignments will appear that don't demand a mask. People will show up who get it without you needing to translate. But first, the transition must complete. Your nervous system is learning to brace for beauty instead of collapse. Ease may feel suspicious at first. Joy may land awkwardly. That's only because your body remembers the language of tension more fluently than that of receiving. But keep receiving. Keep staying open. The reflex to reject good things, just in case, isn't caution, it's outdated armor. Let it melt. Let it be replaced by a steady trust in your own capacity to hold more. The truth is, self-doubt is often a signal that you're attempting something meaningful. Those who build castles rarely feel ready while laying the first stone. But that inner friction is actually proof that you're stretching into something that demands growth. Confidence comes after the leap, not before. You're now entering the chapter where dreams turn tangible. You'll see evidence. You'll touch outcomes. The very people, resources, and paths you once imagined are starting to materialize, not because of luck, but because your preparation finally has somewhere to land. You're no longer reaching. You're receiving. Momentum is no longer an abstract word. It's a current beneath your feet. You'll notice that the resistance once surrounding every decision is softening. Things that used to feel impossible are now bending in your favor. You're not pushing anymore. You're being carried by the very vision you once had to fight for alone. And this path you're on, it's being constructed with you. There's an intelligence moving beside you, not ahead of you. Your job isn't to over-explain or control every detail, it's to stay clear on the why, and let the how arrive in forms that surprise even your best plans. Every door you feared was locked is being opened from the other side. At the core of all this is self-awareness, not as a trend, but as architecture. The more you honor what truly nourishes you, the more sustainable your empire becomes. You're not just chasing goals anymore, you're building a way of living that amplifies your presence without costing your peace. That's not strategy. That's mastery. There are pieces of you scattered across rooms that demanded silence where there should have been color. Moments where you clipped your wings so others wouldn't feel threatened by your reach. Interests you shelved to make yourself more palatable. Traits you dimmed so your presence wouldn't unsettle the fragile. Now, those very elements you buried may hold the blueprint for what comes next. What you once called too much might be exactly what this next chapter requires to unfold. Drawing lines isn't hostility, it's refinement. Every limit you set becomes a gate through which only what honors your expansion can pass. You're not becoming rigid, you're becoming intentional. When your energy has a direction, your no becomes sacred and your yes becomes magnetic. You're not cutting people off. You're protecting the frequency that built your future while they were still rehearsing the past. You weren't shaped for repetition. You were carved from friction to interrupt what others accepted as normal. Every decision to move differently, every refusal to mimic, every time you stood alone instead of blending in, you weren't just surviving. You were blueprinting what freedom looks like when it finally stops asking for permission. Your presence is a portal for others to remember their own originality. The narrative isn't finished, it's stretching. Endings were never endings. They were hinge points. The ones who left too soon were placement markers, not lifelines. The detours weren't mistakes, they were edits made by something wiser than logic. Every scene that collapsed made space for a script that reflects the truth of who you've become, not the illusion of who you were told to be. You were never wired for smallness. There's no universe where you came here to mimic. The magnitude of your design doesn't fit into recycled models. That unease you felt around conformity wasn't rebellion, it was revelation. You're not just here to check boxes. You're here to redesign the structure that holds the boxes. The preparation. That was the prologue. What's next is the evidence. Everything you planted during the seasons where you felt unseen is now rising. Each word you released when no one listened, each risk you took while others hesitated, each choice to believe before results showed up, they've all been weaving into something undeniable. The silence you walked through was not empty. It was rich with roots. This is the initiation of embodiment. You're not simply stepping into success. You're stepping into your own architecture. You're becoming the type of person who generates power without force, who alters systems without shouting, who teaches by example rather than persuasion. You're not just arriving, you're revealing. The thing you came here to build. It's waiting for you to stop waiting.